In the quiet town of Columbus, Georgia, Christine Joy Radbourne, a 29-year-old kindergarten teacher, was known for her warmth, dedication, and compassion. She had moved to Columbus from Hawaii and quickly became well liked by her students, colleagues, and everyone who came into contact with her. Christine had built a peaceful life, living in a modest home near the military base at Fort Benning, where her husband, Dwight Radbourne, was an Army chaplain. Their small, tight-knit community was shocked when, in the spring of 2015, Christine was found murdered in a seemingly random and gruesome act of violence. But beneath the surface, there was much more to Christine's life than anyone knew. Christine had lived through a personal struggle that she had kept hidden for most of her adult life. She was a transgender woman, something that no one, not even her new husband, knew about until just days before her death. Christine's journey towards self-acceptance was one of immense courage and struggle. Born as Chris James, she had struggled with her gender identity from a young age. During her college years, Christine began her transition into the woman she had always felt she was. She underwent hormone therapy and eventually surgery to align her physical body with her true identity. After transitioning, Christine moved to Columbus to begin a new chapter in her life. To most people, she was simply Christine Radbourne, a dedicated and kind kindergarten teacher, admired for her patience and understanding. However, Christine lived with a secret that only a few close friends and therapists knew about. She had transitioned from male to female. It was a secret she kept hidden, even from Dwight Radbourne, her new husband. This secrecy stemmed from Christine's deep fear of rejection, particularly from the man she had just married. Christine met Dwight Radbourne through mutual friends, and their relationship quickly turned serious. Dwight, an Army chaplain stationed at Fort Benning, was charming, disciplined, and devout. Raised in a conservative religious household, Dwight was committed to a traditional view of marriage and family. In a whirlwind romance, Dwight and Christine got married just a few weeks before her tragic death. The ceremony was small, intimate, and filled with hope for a new life together. However, Christine's past was about to become an obstacle in their relationship. On their wedding night, Christine revealed her secret to Dwight. She was transgender. It was a revelation that shocked Dwight to his core. The man he had married was not the woman he thought she was. Dwight's reaction to Christine's confession was one of deep confusion, shock, and emotional turmoil. Raised in a religious community with very specific views on gender and marriage, Dwight struggled to reconcile his faith with the truth Christine had shared. While he didn't immediately react with anger, the disclosure caused an intense internal conflict. Christine, sensing his discomfort, desperately hoped that Dwight would come to accept her and their marriage. She believed they could work through it. However, in the days that followed, Dwight became more distant. The love and affection that had been present before the wedding slowly began to fade. Dwight's unease turned to frustration, and he began to question everything about his marriage. His belief system, his role as a husband, and his own identity as a man were all in turmoil. On the morning of April 15, 2015, a sanitation worker named Marcus Hall was going about his usual rounds in the Victory Drive area of Columbus, Georgia. As he was emptying the trash behind a Crystal fast food restaurant, he noticed what appeared to be a discarded pile of clothing. Upon closer inspection, his heart sank as he realized it wasn't just a pile of clothes. It was a body. He immediately contacted 911, reporting the discovery. The police responded swiftly to the scene, and the body was identified as Christine Joy Radbourne, a 29-year-old kindergarten teacher. The discovery was chilling not only because of the gruesome nature of her death, but also because of the location, behind a fast food restaurant, a place typically frequented by early morning workers and late-night revelers, a place that could easily have kept her body hidden, if not for the fortuitous actions of a sanitation worker. The police immediately began cordoning off the area as they began to examine the body and gather evidence. The scene was horrific. Christine's body was discovered behind the Crystal restaurant, dumped near a dumpster. She was partially clothed, wearing only her underwear, and had visible signs of violence. Her throat had been brutally slashed, and there were other signs that she had been strangled. Her face showed signs of being beaten, and there was evidence that she had fought for her life. The lack of struggle at the immediate scene, however, suggested that the murder had taken place elsewhere before her body was disposed of. The area was not heavily trafficked at that time of day, which raised suspicions about the person responsible for the murder. They likely had hoped that the body would go unnoticed, or perhaps were trying to dispose of it in a place where they thought it would stay hidden. However, the visibility of the area and the chance discovery by Marcus Hall led to the body being found sooner than the perpetrator had anticipated. The brutality of the murder, coupled with the fact that Christine was dumped like trash behind a restaurant, suggested a deep personal animosity or a crime of passion. Investigators quickly realized they were dealing with a potentially high-profile case, and their investigation would need to proceed carefully. As soon as the police confirmed that the body belonged to Christine Radbourne, they initiated a formal homicide investigation. The first priority was to identify a possible motive, and the initial information on Christine's life did not raise any obvious red flags. She was well liked in her community as a kindergarten teacher and appeared to have no enemies. However, as police began their interviews with people who knew Christine, the focus soon turned toward her personal life. Christine's family members, friends, and colleagues were interviewed to gather any information that might offer insight into her life. Most of them spoke highly of her, and none seemed to suspect that she had any personal enemies. However, it became clear that there was one significant factor that could have played a role in her murder: her marriage to Dwight Radbourne. He was the last person known to have seen Christine alive, and investigators began to view him with growing suspicion. The investigation was spearheaded by Detective Sarah Lee Baldwin, a seasoned investigator known for her thoroughness and sharp instincts. Baldwin had handled a number of difficult cases, but Christine's death felt different. It was personal, and the brutality of the crime suggested that there might be deeper, more complex motives at play. Detective Baldwin immediately focused on Christine's relationship with her husband, Dwight Radbourne. While speaking with friends and family, Baldwin learned that Dwight and Christine had only been married for a short time and that their relationship had been marked by some strain. What raised further concern was the revelation that Christine had recently disclosed a deeply personal secret to Dwight. She had transitioned from male to female. This bombshell had shocked Dwight, and Baldwin soon realized that Christine's revelation about her transgender identity could be a key factor in the unraveling of the case. As the investigation into Christine Radbourne's murder unfolded, suspicion began to focus on her husband, Dwight. Dwight was the last person to see Christine alive and was questioned by police shortly after her body was discovered. Initially, Dwight seemed cooperative and remorseful, claiming he was distraught over his wife's death. However, there were inconsistencies in his statements that raised red flags for investigators. Dwight told the police that he was at home the night Christine was murdered, but his alibi was weak. He claimed that he had spent the evening praying and reading his Bible, yet there were no witnesses to corroborate his story. Moreover, he appeared oddly calm when questioned by the police, lacking the emotional outbursts that might be expected of a man who had just lost his wife. While Dwight's demeanor didn't necessarily indicate guilt, it certainly made him an intriguing suspect. Adding to the suspicion was the nature of their marriage. Christine had recently revealed to Dwight that she was transgender, which seemed to have caused significant emotional strain in their relationship. Dwight had difficulty accepting Christine's identity, which led to frequent arguments and emotional distance. Investigators speculated that this tension could have escalated, eventually leading Dwight to commit an act of violence. His behavior and the mounting evidence placed him firmly at the center of the investigation. Dwight's emotional and psychological struggle with Christine's revelation about her transgender past was a central aspect of their troubled marriage. Christine had decided to confide in Dwight, explaining that she had transitioned from male to female years earlier. Dwight's reaction to this revelation was not one of acceptance or understanding, but one of shock and rejection. Raised in a deeply conservative Christian family, Dwight's beliefs about gender and marriage were rooted in traditional views. He found it difficult to reconcile his love for Christine with the truth of her past, leading to confusion and emotional turmoil. In the weeks following the revelation, Dwight became increasingly withdrawn and distant. Their marriage, once full of promise, began to deteriorate. Christine, sensing Dwight's discomfort and rejection, grew frustrated and isolated. Despite attempts at communication, the couple seemed to be drifting further apart. Dwight's internal conflict between his religious beliefs and his love for Christine seemed to create a storm of emotions that he was unable to resolve. This emotional turmoil likely played a key role in the escalating tension between Dwight and Christine. Investigators began to believe that this personal struggle could have been a factor in Christine's tragic death. While there was no direct evidence at this point connecting Dwight to the murder, his psychological state raised significant concerns for the investigators. As the investigation continued, Dwight's role in his wife's death became more suspect. His alibi, which was already shaky, continued to fall apart under scrutiny. The police began to piece together a clearer timeline of events leading up to Christine's murder. Dwight had been unable to provide any solid evidence that he had been at home the night she died, and his emotional detachment in the aftermath of her death raised further suspicions. The more the investigators learned about Dwight's background, the more they found troubling signs. Dwight had been involved in some illegal activities, including secretive financial transactions. His inability to deal with the revelation about Christine's past seemed to have pushed him further into a state of emotional distress, and investigators wondered if this distress could have led to violent outbursts. The tension between Dwight's public persona as a devout religious man and the private, darker side of his life began to take center stage in the investigation. Christine's friends and family painted a picture of a troubled relationship where Dwight struggled with issues of identity, masculinity, and acceptance. Dwight's strained mental state, combined with the physical evidence of Christine's brutal murder, led the authorities to officially make him the prime suspect. Pastor Michael Diaz was an influential figure in both Dwight and Christine's lives. As the spiritual leader of their church, Pastor Diaz had a significant impact on their relationship and the personal struggles they faced. Dwight, who was deeply religious, looked up to Pastor Diaz for guidance, especially during the difficult times in his marriage. In the early days of their relationship, Pastor Diaz had been a source of strength for Dwight, helping him navigate personal challenges and offering advice on how to be a better husband. However, as the marriage between Dwight and Christine began to unravel, Pastor Diaz's influence took on a more troubling aspect. Christine, on the other hand, began to feel uncomfortable with Pastor Diaz's behavior. She confided in close friends that Pastor Diaz had made her feel uneasy with his increasingly personal comments and invasive questions about her past. She had been reluctant to share her transgender identity with anyone in the church, but Pastor Diaz's probing questions eventually led her to reveal the truth to him. Rather than offering support, he used her vulnerability to manipulate her. Christine found herself caught in a difficult situation where Pastor Diaz began to demand certain favors in exchange for keeping her secret safe. The role of Pastor Diaz became more complicated when investigators found that he had likely been aware of the growing tension between Dwight and Christine. He had a keen understanding of Dwight's emotional state, which had been deteriorating since Christine's revelation about her transgender identity. Pastor Diaz had also been a constant presence in Dwight's life, helping him to cope with the strains in his marriage. Investigators began to question whether Pastor Diaz's influence had played a significant role in the mental and emotional decline that Dwight experienced in the days leading up to Christine's death. As the investigation into Christine's murder unfolded, disturbing details about Pastor Diaz's personal life came to light. Beneath his polished, charismatic exterior, Pastor Diaz had a darker, more sinister side that had been hidden from the congregation for years. He had been using his position of power and trust within the church for personal gain, and his influence over Dwight and Christine had extended well beyond spiritual guidance. Authorities uncovered evidence that Pastor Diaz was involved in a number of criminal activities, including drug trafficking and financial scams. He had been using his religious position to cover up his illegal dealings and to exert control over vulnerable individuals. Christine had unwittingly become one of his targets, Investigators discovered that Pastor Diaz had been providing her with drugs in exchange for her silence about his inappropriate advances. He had been exploiting her fears about her transgender identity and used this knowledge to manipulate her into complying with his demands. This abuse of power only worsened the already fragile situation between Dwight and Christine. The revelation of Pastor Diaz's dark side sent shockwaves through the community, which had trusted him for years. Many church members had been unaware of his criminal activities and manipulation. His dual life as a respected pastor and a criminal mastermind was something he had carefully hidden. It became clear that Pastor Diaz had not only played a pivotal role in the breakdown of Dwight and Christine's marriage, but had also been actively contributing to the toxic dynamics that ultimately led to Christine's tragic death. Investigators began to theorize that Pastor Diaz's role in this case was more significant than they initially realized, and that he might have even played a direct role in the events that led up to Christine's murder. While the investigation was primarily focused on Dwight as the prime suspect, detectives also uncovered a series of suspicious financial transactions that pointed to a much larger network of illegal activity. Dwight, it turned out, had been involved in a series of secret deals that linked him to criminal organizations. The evidence showed that Dwight had been making large, untraceable payments to accounts overseas, which raised red flags for the police. At first, it seemed unlikely that Dwight, a man so focused on his faith, could be involved in something as sinister as international arms trading or financial fraud. However, the deeper the investigation went, the more they uncovered about his secret dealings. Dwight had been using his position within the church and his reputation as a respectable man to cover his tracks. His financial transactions were hidden through a series of shell companies and off-the-books deals, making it difficult to trace the origins of the money. The discovery of these secret deals raised significant questions about Dwight's motives and the potential for financial gain in his marriage. Investigators began to consider whether Dwight's involvement in these illegal dealings had led him to kill Christine in order to protect his secrets. The strain of keeping such a double life, combined with the emotional turmoil surrounding his wife's transgender identity, might have led Dwight to a breaking point. The mounting pressure from both his personal and financial lives made him a much more dangerous suspect than initially anticipated. After a lengthy and intense trial, Dwight Radbourne was found guilty of second-degree murder in the death of his wife, Christine. The evidence against him was damning. His inconsistent alibi, the mounting evidence of his emotional and psychological struggles, and his secret financial dealings. While Dwight maintained his innocence throughout the trial, the jury ultimately decided that the evidence pointed to him as the killer. The prosecution argued that Dwight's inability to accept Christine's transgender identity, combined with the increasing tension in their marriage and his involvement in criminal activities, had pushed him over the edge. His emotional struggles, coupled with the manipulative influence of Pastor Diaz, created a volatile situation that ultimately led to the tragic death of Christine. The jury found that Dwight had acted in a moment of intense emotional distress, but that this did not absolve him of the crime. Dwight's conviction sent shockwaves through the community, particularly within the church where he had been a well-respected member. Many of his friends and family members had believed that Dwight was incapable of such violence, but the trial revealed the dark side of his personality that had remained hidden for so long. Despite the verdict, there was still a lingering sense of disbelief that the man they had known for years could have committed such a horrific act. The tragic death of Christine Radbourne serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of unresolved conflict, the manipulation of power, and the destructive forces of intolerance. The case highlighted the complexities of identity, religion, and personal struggle, and how these elements can intersect in ways that lead to devastating consequences. Christine's death was not just a result of one person's actions, but rather a culmination of various factors. Dwight's inability to accept his wife's transgender identity, the manipulative influence of Pastor Diaz, and Dwight's involvement in illegal activities all created a perfect storm of tension and instability. The case also revealed the darker side of religious institutions, where figures like Pastor Diaz abused their power and trust for personal gain, further complicating the dynamics between Dwight and Christine. In the end, Dwight was held accountable for Christine's death. But the case also exposed the deep emotional and psychological trauma that had led to such a tragic outcome. Christine's story remains a powerful reminder of the importance of acceptance, compassion, and the dangers of living a life of secrecy and fear. While the legal process may have concluded with Dwight's conviction, the lessons learned from Christine's life and death will continue to resonate, reminding us of the complexity of human relationships and the profound impact that understanding and acceptance can have on a person's life.